Grand Central Terminal is a commuter railroad terminal at 42nd Street and Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan in New York City, United States. Built by and named for the New York Central Railroad in the heyday of American long-distance passenger rail travel, it is the largest such facility in the world by number of platforms, with 44 serving 67 tracks along them. They are on 2 levels, both below ground, with 41 tracks on the upper level and 26 on the lower, though the total number of tracks along platforms and in rail yards exceeds 100. The terminal covers an area of 48 acres. The terminal serves commuters traveling on the Metro-North Railroad to Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess counties in New York State, and Fairfield and New Haven counties in Connecticut. Until 1991 the terminal served Amtrak, which moved to nearby Pennsylvania Station upon completion of the Empire Connection. Although the terminal has been properly called a OE Grand Central Terminale since 1913, it has always been more colloquially and affectionately known as Grand Central Station, the name of the previous rail station on the same site, and of the U.S. Post Office station next door, which is not part of the terminal. It is also sometimes used to refer to the Grand Central 42nd Street subway station, which serves the terminal. Featuring monumental spaces and meticulously crafted detail, Grand Central Terminal has been described as the world's loveliest station. In 2011, travel magazine Travel Plus Leisure rated it the 6th most visited tourist attraction for its roughly 21.6 million annual visitors. Layout. The tracks are numbered according to their location in the terminal building. The upper-level tracks are numbered 11 to 42 east to west. Tracks 22 and 31 were removed in the late 1990s to build concourses for Grand Central North. Track 12 was removed to expand the platform between tracks 11 and 13, and track 14 is only used for loading a garbage train. The lower level has 27 tracks, numbered 100 to 126, east to west. Currently, only tracks 102 112, and 114 116 are used for passenger service. Often, local and off-peak trains depart from the lower level, while express, super express, and peak trains depart from the main concourse. Odd-numbered tracks are usually on the east side of the platform. Even-numbered tracks on the west. The public timetables for April 3, 2011, show 286 weekday departures, 74 Hudson, 101 Harlem and 111 New Haven Line. Grand Central has restaurants, such as the Oyster Bar, and various fast food outlets surrounding the dining concourse on the level below the main concourse, as well as delis, bakeries, newsstands, a gourmet and fresh food market, an annex of the New York Transit Museum, and more than 40 retail stores. Among them are chain stores, including a Starbucks coffee shop, a Rite Aid pharmacy and, as of December 2011, an Apple store. Other anticipated chain stores include a Shake Shack. A secret sub-basement known as M42 lies under the terminal, containing the AC to DC converters used to supply DC traction current to the terminal. The exact location of M42 is a closely guarded secret and does not appear on maps, though it has been shown on television, most notably, the History Channel program Cities of the Underworld, and also a National Geographic special. The original rotary converters were not removed in the late 20th century when solid-state ones took over their job, and they remain as a historical record. During World War II, this facility was closely guarded because its sabotage would have impaired troop movement on the eastern seaboard. It is said that any unauthorized person entering the facility during the war risked being shot on sight. The rotary converters could have easily been crippled by a bucket of sand. UPA sent 2 spies to sabotage it. They were arrested by the FBI before they could strike. From 1924 through 1944, the attic of the East Wing contained a 7,000-square-foot art school and gallery space called the Grand Central School of Art. Main Concourse. The main concourse is the center of Grand Central. The space is cavernous, a 275 aft long, 120 aft wide and 125 aft high and usually filled with bustling crowds. The ticket booths are in the concourse, although many now stand unused or have been repurposed since the introduction of ticket vending machines. The large American flag was hung in Grand Central Terminal a few days after the September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center. The main information booth is in the center of the concourse. This is a perennial meeting place, and the four-faced clock on top of the information booth is perhaps the most recognizable icon of Grand Central. The clock, designed by Henry Edward Bedford and cast in Waterbury, Connecticut, is made from brass. Each of the four clock faces is made from opalescent glass, though urban legend has it that the faces are made of opal and that Sotheby's and Christie's have estimated their value to be between $10 million and $20 million. A 1954 New York Times article on the restoration of the clock notes that each of the glass faces was 24 inches in diameter. Within the marble and brass pagoda lies a secret door that conceals a spiral staircase leading to the lower-level information booth. Outside the station, the 13-foot clock in front of the Grand Central facade facing 42nd Street contains the world's largest example of Tiffany glass. It is surrounded by sculptures Minerva, Hercules, and Mercury. The sculptures were designed by French sculptor Jules Félix Coutan and carved by the John Donnelly Company. At its unveiling in 1914, the 48-foot-high trio was considered the largest sculptural group in the world. The upper-level tracks are reached from the main concourse or from various hallways and passages branching off from it. On the east side of the main concourse is a cluster of food purveyor shops called Grand Central Market. Ceiling. In autumn 1998, a 12-year restoration of Grand Central revealed the original luster of the main concourse's elaborately decorated astronomical ceiling. The original ceiling, conceived in 1912 by Warren with his friend, French portrait artist Paul Carr, copyright Zahala, was eventually replaced in the late 1930s to correct falling plaster. This new ceiling was obscured by decades of what was thought to be coal and diesel smoke. Spectroscopic examination revealed that it was mostly tar and nicotine from tobacco smoke. A single dark patch remains above the Michael Jordan Steakhouse, left untouched by renovators to remind visitors of the grime that once covered the ceiling. The starry ceiling is astronomically inaccurate in a complicated way. While the stars within some constellations appear correctly as they would from Earth, other constellations are reversed left to right, as is the overall arrangement of the constellations on the ceiling. For example, Orion is correctly and beautifully rendered, but the adjacent constellations Taurus and Gemini are reversed both internally and in their relation to Orion, with Taurus near Orion's raised arm where Gemini should be. One possible explanation is that the overall ceiling design might have been based on the medieval custom of depicting the sky as it would appear to God looking in at the celestial sphere from outside, but that would have reversed Orion as well. A more likely explanation is partially mistaken transcription of the sketch supplied by Columbia astronomy professor Harold Jacoby. Though the astronomical inconsistencies were noticed promptly by a commuter in 1913, they have not been corrected in any of the subsequent renovations of the ceiling. There is a small dark circle in the midst of the stars right above the image of Pisces. In a 1957 attempt to counteract feelings of insecurity spawned by the Soviet launch of Sputnik, Grand Central's main concourse played host to an American Redstone missile. With no other way to erect the missile, the hole was cut so the rocket could be lifted into place. Historical preservation dictated that this hole remain as a testament to the many uses of the terminal over the years. Dining concourse and lower-level tracks. The dining concourse, below the main concourse and connected to it by numerous stairs, ramps, and escalators, provides access to the lower-level tracks. It has central seating and lounge areas, surrounded by restaurants including the Oyster Bar with its Gustavino tile vaults. Vanderbilt Hall and Campbell Apartment. Vanderbilt Hall, named for the family that built and owned the station, serves as the entrance area from 42nd Street at Pershing Square. It sits next to the main concourse. Formerly the main waiting room for the terminal, it is now used for the annual Christmas market and special exhibitions, and is rented for private events. The Campbell Apartment is an elegantly restored cocktail lounge, just south of the 43rd Street Vanderbilt Avenue entrance, that attracts a mix of commuters and tourists. It was at one time the office of 1920s tycoon John W. Campbell and replicates the Gallery Hall of a 13th-century Florentine palace. Display board. The original blackboard with arrival and departure information by track 36 was replaced by an electromechanical display in the main concourse over the ticket windows that displayed times and track numbers of arriving and departing trains. It contained rows of flip panels that displayed train information, and became a New York institution, as its many displays would flap simultaneously to reflect changes in train schedules, an indicator of just how busy Grand Central was. A small example of this type of device hangs in the Museum of Modern Art as an example of outstanding industrial design. The flapboard destination sign was replaced with high-resolution mosaic LCD modules manufactured by Solari Upton of Italy, the maker of the original flapboards for train stations and airports. Similar modules are now also used on the trains, both on the sides to display the destination, and on the interior to display the time, next station, calling points, and other passenger information. Subway station. The subway platforms at Grand Central are reached from the main concourse. Built by the Interborough Rapid Transit Company rather than the New York Central Railroad, the subway areas of the station lack the majesty that is present throughout most of the rest of Grand Central, although they are in similar condition to its track levels. The IRT 42nd Street shuttle platforms were originally an express stop on the original IRT subway, opened in 1904. Once the IRT Lexington Avenue line was extended uptown in 1918, the original tracks were converted to shuttle use. One track remains connected to the downtown Lexington Avenue local track, but the connection is not in revenue service. A fire in the 1960s destroyed much of the shuttle station, which has been rebuilt. The only signs of the fire damage are truncated steel beams visible above the platforms. There are also two other platform levels the IRT Lexington Avenue line's platforms, which are directly below the shuttle platforms, and the IRT Flushing Line platform, which is deeper than the IRT Lexington Avenue line's platforms. In 2014, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority installed an online, interactive touchscreen computer program called On the Go Travel Station in Grand Central. The self-updating kiosks allow people to route their trips, and check for delays. The MTA set up the map as part of a pilot project that saw the OTGs initially installed in 5 subway stations. It lists any planned work or service changes occurring on the subway as well as information to help travelers find landmarks or locales near the stations with an OTG outlet, wherein the first station to test this new technology had been Bowling Green. Grand Central North. Grand Central North, opened on August 18, 1999, provides access to Grand Central from 45th Street, 47th Street, and 48th Street. It is connected to the main concourse through 2 long hallways that run parallel to the tracks on the upper level, the 1,000-foot Northwest Passage and 1,200-foot Northeast Passage. Entrances are at the northeast corner of East 47th Street and Madison Avenue, northeast corner of East 48th Street and Park Avenue, and on the east and west sides of 230 Park Avenue between 45th and 46th Streets. A 5th entrance opened in early 2012 on the south side of 47th Street between Park and Lexington Avenues. The 47th Street Passage provides access to the upper-level tracks and the 45th Street Passage provides access to the lower-level tracks. Elevator access is available to the 47th Street Passage from street level on the north side of East 47th Street, between Madison and Vanderbilt Avenues. There is no elevator access to the actual train platforms from Grand Central North. Handicapped access is provided through the main terminal. Near the north end of the passages, there is an Arts for Transit mosaic installation by Ellen Driscoll, an artist from Brooklyn. The entrances to Grand Central North were originally open from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Friday and 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. In summer 2006, Grand Central North was closed on weekends, with the MTA citing low usage and the need to save money. Before it was closed, about 6,000 people used Grand Central North on a typical weekend, and about 30,000 on weekdays. Ideas for a northern entrance to Grand Central had been discussed since at least the 1970s. Construction on Grand Central North lasted from 1994 to 1999 and cost $75 million. Delays were attributed to the incomplete nature of the original blueprints of Grand Central and previously undiscovered groundwater beneath East 45th Street. As of 2007, the passages are not air-conditioned. The passages in the terminal are Metro North Railroad Upper Level, Northwest and Northeast Passage, 47th Street Cross Passage, 45th Street Cross Passage, Metro North Railroad Lower Level, platforms and tracks. History. 3 buildings serving essentially the same function have stood on this site. The original large and imposing scale was intended by the New York Central Railroad to enhance competition and compare favorably in the public eye with the arch-rival Pennsylvania Railroad and smaller lines. Grand Central Depot. Grand Central Depot brought the trains of the New York Central and Hudson River Railroad, the New York and Harlem Railroad, and the New York and New Haven Railroad together in one large station. The station was designed by John B. Snook and opened in October 1871. The original plan was for the Harlem Railroad to start using it on October 9, 1871, the New Haven Railroad on October 16, and the Hudson River Railroad on October 23, with the staggering done to minimize confusion. However, the Hudson River Railroad did not move to it until November 1, which puts the other 2 dates in doubt. The headhouse building containing passenger service areas and railroad offices was an L shape with a short leg running east-west on 42nd Street and a long leg running north-south on Vanderbilt Avenue. The train shed, north and east of the headhouse, had 3 innovations in U.S. practice. The platforms were elevated to the height of the cars, the roof was a balloon shed with a clear span over all of the tracks, and only passengers with tickets were allowed on the platforms. The Harlem, Hudson and New Haven trains were initially in side-by-side different stations, which created chaos in baggage transfer. The combined Grand Central Depot serviced all 3 railroads. Grand Central Station. Between 1899 and 1900, the head house was essentially demolished. It was expanded from 3 to 6 stories with an entirely new facade, on plans by railroad architect Bradford Gilbert. The train shed was kept. The tracks that previously continued south of 42nd Street were removed and the train yard reconfigured in an effort to reduce congestion and turnaround time for trains. The reconstructed building was renamed Grand Central Station. Grand Central Terminal. Between 1903 and 1913, the entire building was torn down in phases and replaced by the current Grand Central Terminal, which was designed by the architectural firms of Reed and Stem and Warren and Wheatmore, who entered an agreement to act as the associated architects of Grand Central Terminal in February 1904. Reed and Stem were responsible for the overall design of the station. Warren and Wheatmore added architectural details and the Beaux Arts style. Charles Reed was appointed the chief executive for the collaboration between the 2 firms, and promptly appointed Alfred T. Fellheimer as head of the combined design team. This work was accompanied by the electrification of the 3 railroads using the station and the burial of the approach in the Park Avenue Tunnel. The result of this was the creation of several blocks worth of prime real estate in Manhattan, which were then sold for a large sum of money. In addition, the terminal itself contained support structures for a possible future tower to be built above it. The new terminal opened on February 2, 1913. The terminal is made primarily from granite. In fact, so much granite is used, the building emits relatively high levels of radiation on a regular basis. Covering Park Avenue, to accommodate ever-growing rail traffic into the restricted Midtown area, William J. Wilgers, chief engineer of the New York Central Railroad, took advantage of the recent electrification technology to propose a novel scheme, a B-level station below ground. Arriving trains would go underground under Park Avenue, and proceed to an upper-level incoming station if they were mainline trains, or to a lower-level platform if they were suburban trains. In addition, turning loops within the station itself obviated complicated switching moves to bring back the trains to the coach yards for servicing. Departing mainline trains reversed into upper-level platforms in the conventional way. Burying electric trains underground brought an additional advantage to the railroads, the ability to sell above-ground air rights over the tracks and platforms for real estate development. With time, prestigious apartment and office buildings were erected around Grand Central, which turned the area into the most desirable commercial office district in Manhattan. The terminal also did away with bifurcating Park Avenue by introducing a circumferential elevated driveway that allowed Park Avenue traffic to traverse around the building and over 42nd Street without encumbering nearby streets. The building was also designed to eventually reconnect both segments of 43rd Street by going through the concourse if the City of New York demanded it. Terminal City. The construction of Grand Central created a mini-city within New York, including the Commodore Hotel and various office buildings. It spurred construction throughout the neighborhood in the 1920s, including the Chrysler Building. In 1928, the New York Central built its headquarters in a 34-story building straddling Park Avenue on the north side of the terminal. There is a secret platform, number 61, under the station. This was once used to convey President Franklin D. Roosevelt directly into the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. This platform was part of the original design of the Waldorf Astoria. It was mentioned in the New York Times in 1929 but was first used by General Pershing in 1938. From 1939 to 1964, CBS Television occupied a large portion of the terminal building, particularly above the main waiting room. The space contained 2 production studios, 2 program control facilities, network master control, and facilities for local station WCBS-TV. In 1958, the first major videotape operations facility in the world opened in a former rehearsal room on the 7th floor of the main terminal building. The facility used 14 Ampex VO1000 videotape recorders. The CBS Evening News began its broadcasts there with Douglas Edwards. Many historic news events were broadcast from this location, such as John Glenn's Mercury Atlas 6 space mission and Walter Cronkite's coverage of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Edward R. Murrow's See It Now originated from Grand Central, including his famous broadcasts on Senator Joseph McCarthy. The Murrow broadcasts were recreated in George Clooney's movie Good Night, and Good Luck, although the CBS News and corporate offices were not actually in the same building as the film implies. The long-running panel show, What's My Line?, was first broadcast from the GCT studios, as were the Goldbergs, and Mama. The facility's operations were later moved to the CBS Broadcast Center. In 1966, the former studio space was converted to a sports club with 2 tennis courts and was operated by Donald Trump from 1984 to 2009. The space is currently occupied by a conductor lounge and a smaller sports facility with a single tennis court. Grand Central Art Galleries. From 1922 to 1958, Grand Central Terminal was the home of the Grand Central Art Galleries, which were established by John Singer Sargent, Edmund Greason, Walter Layton Clark, and others. The founders had sought a location in Manhattan that was central and easily accessible, and through the support of Alfred Holland Smith, president of the New York Central Railroad, the top of the terminal was made available. A 10-year lease was signed, and the galleries, together with the railroad company, invested more than $100,000 in preparing the space. The architect was William Adams Delano, best known for designing Yale Divinity School's Sterling Quadrangle. At their opening, the galleries extended over most of the terminal's 6th floor, 15,000 square feet, and offered 8 main exhibition rooms, a foyer gallery, and a reception area. A total of 20 display rooms were planned for what was intended as the largest sales gallery of art in the world. The official opening was March 22, 1923, and featured paintings by Sargent, Charles W. Hawthorne, Cecilia Beaux, Wayman Adams, and Ernest Ibsen. Sculptors included Daniel Chester French, Herbert Adams, Robert Aitken, Gutzon Borglum, and Frederick MacMonnies. The event attracted 5,000 people and received a glowing review from the New York Times. A year after they opened, the galleries established the Grand Central School of Art, which occupied 7,000 square feet on the 7th floor of the east wing of the terminal. The school was directed by Sargent and Daniel Chester French. Its first-year teachers included painters Jonas Lai and Nikolai Fechin, sculptor Chester Beach, illustrator Dean Cornwell, costume designer Helen Dryden, and muralist Ezra Winter. The Grand Central Art Galleries remained in the terminal until 1958, when they moved to the Biltmore Hotel. They remained at the Biltmore for 23 years, until it was converted into an office building. When the Biltmore was demolished in 1981, they relocated to 24 West 57th Street. They ceased operations in 1994. Proposals for demolition and towers. In 1947, over 65 million people, the equivalent of 40% of the population of the United States, traveled through Grand Central. However, railroads soon fell into a major decline with competition from government-subsidized highways and intercity airline traffic. Grand Central was designed to support a tower built above it. In 1954, William Zeckendorf proposed replacing Grand Central with an 80-story, 4,800,000 square foot tower, 500 feet taller than the Empire State Building. IMP created a pinched cylinder design that took the form of a glass cylinder with a wasp waist. The plan was abandoned. In 1955, Erwin S. Wolfson made his first proposal for a tower north of the terminal replacing the terminal's 6-story office building. A revised Wolfson plan was approved in 1958 and the Pan Am Building was completed in 1963. Although the Pan Am Building bought time for the terminal, the New York Central Railroad continued its precipitous decline. In 1968, facing bankruptcy, it merged with the Pennsylvania Railroad to form the Penn Central Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad was in its own precipitous decline and in 1964 had demolished the ornate Pennsylvania Station to make way for an office building and the new Madison Square Garden. In 1968, Penn Central unveiled plans for a tower designed by Marcel Breuer even bigger than the Pan Am Building to be built over Grand Central. Since Grand Central was designed to support a tower above it, the Marcel Breuer design would have utilized the existing tower support structure but would not have preserved the facade or the main waiting room. The plans drew huge opposition, most prominently from Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Is it not cruel to let our city die by degrees, stripped of all her proud monuments, until there will be nothing left of all her history and beauty to inspire our children? If they are not inspired by the past of our city, where will they find the strength to fight for her future? Americans care about their past, but for short-term gain they ignore it and tear down everything that matters. Maybe this is the time to take a stand, to reverse the tide, so that we won't all end up in a uniform world of steel and glass boxes. 6 months prior to the unveiling of the Breuer plans, however, the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission designated Grand Central a landmark. Penn Central was unable to secure permission from the commission to execute either of Breuer's 2 blueprints and filed suit against the city, alleging a taking. The resulting case, Penn Central Transportation Company v. New York City, was the first time that the Supreme Court ruled on a matter of historic preservation. The court saved the terminal, holding that New York City's Landmarks Preservation Act did not constitute a taking of Penn Central's property under the Fifth Amendment and was a reasonable use of government land use regulatory power. Penn Central went into bankruptcy in 1970 in what was then the biggest corporate bankruptcy in American history. Title to Grand Central passed to Penn Central's corporate successor, American Premier Underwriters. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority signed a 280-year lease in 1994 and began a massive restoration. Midtown TDR Ventures, LLC, an investment group controlled by Argent Ventures, purchased the station from American Financial in December 2006. Bombing. On September 11, 1976, a group of Croatian nationalists planted a bomb in a coin locker at Grand Central Terminal. The group also hijacked a plane. After stating their political demands, they revealed the location and provided the instructions for disarming the Grand Central Terminal bomb. The disarming operation was not executed properly and the resulting explosion wounded over 30 and killed 1 NYPD bomb squad specialist. Restorations and Centennial, Donald Trump, Grand Central and its neighborhood fell on hard times during the financial collapse of its host railroads and the near bankruptcy of New York City itself. In 1975, Donald Trump bought the Commodore Hotel to the east of the terminal for $10 million and then worked out a deal with Jay Pritzker to transform it into one of the first Grand Hyatt hotels. Trump negotiated various tax breaks and, in the process, agreed to renovate the exterior of the terminal. The complementary masonry from the Commodore was covered with a mirror glass slipcover for Section A. The masonry still exists underneath. In the same deal, Trump optioned Penn Central's rail yards on the Hudson River between 59th and 72nd Streets that eventually became Trump Place, the biggest private development in New York City. The Grand Hyatt opened in 1980 and the neighborhood immediately began a transformation. Trump sold his interest in the hotel for $142 million, establishing him as a big-time player in New York real estate. Metro-North, throughout this period, the interior of Grand Central was dominated by huge billboard advertisements, with perhaps the most famous being the giant Kodak Colorama photos that ran along the entire east side, and the West Clock's Big Ben clock over the South Concourse. Amtrak left the station on April 7, 1991. With the completion of the Empire Connection, which allowed trains from Albany, Toronto, and Montreal to use Penn Station. Previously, travelers had to change stations via subway, bus, or cab. Since then, Grand Central has exclusively served Metro-North Railroad. In 1994, the MTA signed a long-term lease on the building and began massive renovations. All billboards were removed. These renovations were mostly finished in 1998, though some of the minor refits were not completed until 2000. The most striking effect was the restoration of the main concourse ceiling, revealing the painted skyscape and constellations. The original baggage room, later converted into retail space and occupied for many years by Chemical Bank, was removed, and replaced with a mirror image of the West Stairs. Although the baggage room had been designed by the original architects, the restoration architects found evidence that a set of stairs mirroring those to the west was originally intended for that space. Other modifications included a complete overhaul of the terminal's superstructure and the replacement of the electromechanical Omega board train arrival-departure display with a purely electronic display that was designed to fit into the architecture of the terminal aesthetically. The original quarry in Tennessee was located and reopened specifically to provide matching stone to replace damaged stone and for the new east staircase. Each piece of new stone is labeled with its installation date and the fact that it was not a part of the original terminal building. Ending in 2007, the exterior was again cleaned and restored, starting with the west facade on Vanderbilt Avenue and gradually working counterclockwise. The project involved cleaning the facade, rooftop light courts, and statues. Filling in cracks, repointing stones on the facade, restoring the copper roof and the building's cornice, repairing the large windows of the main concourse, and removing the remaining blackout paint applied to the windows during World War II. The result is a cleaner, more attractive, and structurally sound exterior, and the windows allow much more light into the main concourse. On February 1, 2013, numerous displays, performances and events were held to celebrate the terminal's centennial. Long Island Railroad East Side Access Project. The MTA is in the midst of an ambitious project to bring Long Island Railroad trains into the terminal via the East Side Access Project. The project was spurred by a study that showed that more than half of LIRR riders work closer to Grand Central than to Penn Station. East Side Access has resulted in major blasting work under Grand Central Terminal. Since March 2007, about 1,000 workers have completed more than 2,400 controlled blasts ending about October 4, 2013. A new B-level, 8-track tunnel was excavated under Park Avenue, more than 90 feet below the Metro-North tracks and more than 140 feet below the surface. Reaching the street from the lowest level, more than 175 feet deep, will take about 10 minutes. LIRR trains will access Park Avenue via the existing lower level of the 63rd Street Tunnel, connecting to its main line running through Sunnyside Yard in Queens. Extensions were added on both the Manhattan and Queens sides. Cost estimates jumped from $4.4 billion in 2004 to $6.4 billion in 2006. The MTA said that some small buildings on the route in Manhattan will be torn down to make way for air vents. Cardinal Edward Egan criticized the plan, noting concerns about the tracks, which will largely be on the west side of Park Avenue, and their impact on St. Patrick's Cathedral. The project is scheduled for completion by 2019. Effects on design of transit centers. The design for Grand Central was an innovation in transit hub design and continues to influence designers. One new concept was the use of ramps, rather than staircases, to conduct passengers and luggage through the facility. Another was wrapping Park Avenue around the terminal above the street, creating a second level for picking up and dropping off of passengers. As airline travel replaced railroads in the latter half of the 20th century, Grand Central design innovations were later incorporated into the hub airport. Grand Central Terminal was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and declared a National Historic Landmark in 1976. The Grand Central Terminal Park Avenue Viaduct was added to the National Register in 1983. In popular culture, Grand Central Terminal has been used in numerous novels and film and TV productions over the years. Kyle McCarthy, who handles production at Grand Central Terminal for MTA Metro-North Railroad, Grand Central is one of the quintessential New York places. Whether filmmakers need an establishing shot of arriving in New York or transportation scenes, the restored landmark building is visually appealing and authentic. Many films and television programs were filmed at Grand Central Terminal. For example, the early CBS television series, Mama, which starred Peggy Wood and Rosemary Rice, was originally broadcast live from a now-defunct television studio located above the Oyster Bar. Additional titles include: see also, Architecture of New York City, Penn Central Transportation Company v. New York City, Pennsylvania Station, Transportation in New York City, References, Notes. Citations. Bibliography. External links. Media related to Grand Central Terminal at Wikimedia Commons, Grand Central Terminal, upcoming departures and track assignments from MTA, Grand Central Terminal station listing at Metro-North website, Phototour, Grand Central Terminal, National Geographic video inside Grand Central, New York architecture images Grand Central Terminal, PBS's American Experience, Grand Central, 42nd Street and Vanderbilt Avenue entrance from Google Maps Street View, 42nd Street and Park Avenue entrance from Google Maps Street View, 43rd Street and Lexington Avenue entrance from Google Maps Street View.